Hey everybody. Welcome to week 246. And there's a reason I'm wearing this purple shirt today. Not just because I love Charlotte FC, but what do you get when you mix KU blue and KU red? You get Wildcat purple and you also get purple. So just think about that. You got the red side of the people that were all standing up and cheering. You got the blue side that was all waving crazy things and sitting on their hands. So we are a divided country, clearly. But you mix them all together, you get purple. And everybody is a Wildcat, man. Everybody, like, that's a happy place to be. So anyway, we will be talking about, hey, so what does all this stuff mean? All this, like lots of change going on, lots of broken glass going on, a lot of change. So what's this mean to businesses? And I was just on with another business owner this morning, and they're like, hey, we got questions. We got questions about a number of things. And I said, well, tune in to this. If you can't make it live, join us on the BGW CPA YouTube channel. And Santinello has his own shoemaker YouTube channel. So we'll put this up. And we just lost Jack. So Jack will be coming back. And so Adam, there's Jack. He's just come back.
I'm
Nobody
back.
can see it.
I feel like I'm phasing in and out. So I'm trying to cover my shirt up that has stripes in it. So that way it's not as blinding. So
That's all right. It's looks like Tar Heel blue stripes.
yes, let's pretend it is. It's not, but let's pretend it is.
Let's pretend it is. It may be
Yes.
that background with all the sunlight coming in. It looks very Tar Heel blue back there, but even though it may be a gray background. But
Well, we need all the karma and well wishes over the next 48 hours. I guess it's 48 plus 12-ish. So yes. Yeah.
there you go. So um before we get into like, all right, the unofficial State of the Union, which was called what was it, the Presidential Address of Congress or something like that. I don't remember. I'm sure each news channel had a different name because it can't be an official State of the Union because he hasn't been in office for a year. It's usually a year looking back, right?
Right.
So, but anyway, he addressed Congress, and yeah, there are probably some impacts there. But before we get into that, guess what? CTA, it's off again. I mean, have we ever been whipsawed so badly by anything? I don't recall it. Jack, you want to talk a little bit about where we're at and what you
Yeah,
would recommend, even though it's
right.
not legal advice?
So yes, guidance, not legal advice. So to give you an indication of how we kind of handle it, when we heard about that, okay, it's off, and the reason that it's off, it was the commentary amongst the corporate partners in all of our offices was like, okay, until when kind of thing, what's the next thing? And it was, what do we need? What should we do? Well, we'll do what we normally do, which is put out a client alert, but not do what we did on the front end, which was send out mass emails, distributions that, oh my gosh, and trying not to incite a panic, but to inform people. So we have not blown up your email boxes because if we had done that every single time, you would have blacklisted us about the third time that we told you, wait, never mind. And then the next time that says, oh, forget what we just told you yesterday, it's back on, and vice versa. So the official notification is at the end of last month, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which is the agency that is tasked with collecting the information. If you were actually going to provide the information, or if you did, that is the website that you would go to. And it says that they will not issue any fines or penalties or take any other enforcement actions against companies based on any failure to file or update the reports pursuant to the CTA by the deadlines. And the U.S. Treasury Department, which is essentially the IRS, and other agencies, sub-agencies, said that not only will it not enforce penalties or fines associated with the BOI, because they would be the ones that are collecting But it will further not enforce any penalties or fines against U.S. citizens or domestic reporting companies or the beneficial owners after the forthcoming rule changes take effect. And what they said, they are anticipating the Treasury Department is going to put out a revised regulation that only foreign reporting companies are required to do that. Now, there will be a whole lot of rules around what is a foreign reporting company. You know, if you have someone who's a U.S. citizen that is a minority owner, is that technically a foreign reporting company? So there'll be rules around that. So if you're not involved in international commerce directly on the ownership level, then probably not applicable to you. Then you get in kind of the gray area where you have joint ventures, and it may be that, okay, it's your US LLC that is a joint venture partner with an Italian entity. So, you know, there will be more details about that. But for the most part, sigh of relief. I'm hoping that this is the end of the story. And it's also kind of a lesson, a civics lesson, and, you know, kind of like Schoolhouse Rock and separation of powers kind of thing, where you have an executive agency that puts out something, you have the judiciary saying, yeah, not so fast. The next thing likely is that it would go to the legislature, so to US Congress, to deal with it and either say, yeah, no, we're not going to do that, or yes, we are going to do that. And then that gives the directive to the executive branch to enforce that. But that's been kind of short-circuited where, and it's a different executive branch essentially, but not really. But you have essentially within, you know, one of the three branches of government telling itself, we're not going to enforce this stuff. So I think we're hopefully closer to being in the green and in the area where we can basically say, never mind. So you know, the answer of it depends is it depends, but I'm pretty sure I have higher confidence that this is going to be the end of the story for most US citizens, owners of US entities.
Oh, that's so good. We probably have been blacklisted because we have gone out dutifully every time because everybody's like, "Hey, what should we do? What should we do?" So we've gone out every time, and when we got the notice this week again, like, oh gosh, you know. So another question that we got though this morning with the same company group. Adam, I'm throwing this one to you, and it had to do with, hey, you know, it's funny. Um, the the president of this company says, "Hey, I'm not trying to get political here, but I just read this article that the IRS is looking at slashing a whole bunch of people. What does that mean? Because these guys actually have some amended returns that need to be done, and the IRS actually owes them some money. What should we do?" And so, Adam, what do you think that the implications of that saber rattling, which probably will happen, um, if IRS agents and IRS, it doesn't mean agents, it could be contractors, right? So, what do you think the ramifications are, and for business owners, and what would you recommend doing, if anything?
Um, I'm gonna be underwhelming.
Really?
Yeah. So how much time do I have on this topic, Jack? You know, before you're like, hey, the shoemaker compliance department said, you know,
I'm starting the timer, so please proceed.
yeah, okay, guy, yeah. Yeah, like a little that. Nah. So, you know, I was listening to the news the other night, and you know, intellectually, there's lots of things that I agree with, which is, hey, why is the government larger than it was several years ago? Like that logically makes sense to me at a macro level.
Yeah.
What also logically makes sense to me at a macro level is that, you know, kind of the, hey, we're just treating government like private equity would if they bought a company. You know, it's 5% fat, 10% fat. We're just going to cut it, you know, and then just see what happens, you know, and fix anything that broke. You know, it's like, okay, philosophically, I can get aligned with that too, because, you know, I don't know about at Shoemaker Jack. I can't imagine this ever happening. You know, it's certainly never happened at BGW, you know, where somebody says, you know, I kind of made an evaluation. My job is highly inefficient. And I really think that, you know, with like a couple little tweaks, you can eliminate it altogether. You know, so
Only in one circumstance where you're purposely looking for severance and there's a severance program. But other than that,
yeah,
small
so yeah,
percentage.
right. Said no one ever. Yeah. So like, you know, I totally get that philosophically too. And then, you know, kind of point number three is, you know, the systems at the IRS are woefully antiquated and in a lot of respects still highly manual. You know, so they're ripe for, you know, in other words, like if Doge was really going to go in and like try to do some efficiencies and stuff like that, it's like, hey, it's right for the, you know, right for the undertaking. You know, go fix some shit there. Sorry about that language, Gary. Um,
Uh, you
you
can just
know,
put the coins in the hat.
I think the issue with the IRS specifically though in these cuts is that, you know, everybody said, it's BS that we're giving the IRS more money, you know, that's ridiculous, blah blah. Well, really there were three things that they were trying to address. You know, item number one was woefully antiquated systems. So we want to invest some technology, you know, bring this stuff into like, I'm not even talking about, you know, 2025. Can we at least get to like 2000 level, you know, computer systems? Because it's like this, the core underlying system. I think this is right. Like the code for it was built in the 70s and they're still using it, you know. So meaning like that's not good, you know. Um, so that was about a third of the dollars. Another third of the dollars was to beef up, and that those are dollars that haven't actually been deployed yet, you know, because they were still in the process of designing. So it was appropriated, but not actually deployed yet. The other two areas that the money was appropriated and, you know, mostly spent, which is an area for these cuts, is they beefed up customer service. And by beefed up customer service, that meant hiring more people to answer the phone and resolve problems for people. So to the question directly, you know, what that means is like, unless somehow they can get a more automated way of doing amended tax returns other than the manual way of keying the freaking information in, you know, and then doing some manual intervention on it if anything breaks down, I think that stuff is just going to sit, you know, like in other words, like stuff is just going to be slower, you know, until there's some sort of intervening thing that happens, you know. So for our clients, what does that mean? It means amendments will probably be slower. If you've got a problem that they send you a notice on, that'll probably be slower. But on the positive side, you know, you probably get less notices because there's less people looking for stuff, you know, which gets to point number three, which is the other area where they're eliminating jobs is in the enforcement department. So what that means is just, you know, by default, there will be less audits of that require people, you know, which the people-based audits are the complicated ones, not the simple ones. So there'll be less audits of companies and more complicated individuals. You know, as the BGW managing partner, I'm ecstatic about that because in our client base, we view audits as a colossal waste of everyone's time because with our client base, most often they result in no change. And at the same time, we've got to like respond, you know, on behalf of the client. You know, and I don't know, Jack, you know, how many times have you been successful? I'm sure it's again never happened at Shoemaker. How many times have you been successful in going back to the client and saying, I know this is a colossal waste of time on your part imposed by the government, we incurred $20,000 in fees. Would you pay us that full freight, please? That never happens, right?
No.
So, yeah, so it's like, I can't even say it's a lost leader, Gary. It's just more like a suck.
It's a loss.
Yeah, it's just a loss that we kind of do as a courtesy. But hey, we haven't really figured out a way to price it in either. So as the managing partner of BGW, I'm ecstatic. Like when we had one of our clients who received a letter, literally we received this letter like 3 weeks ago, and it said, due to impending staffing cuts, and they were part of this group that is getting laid off, due to impending staffing cuts, we're going now and preemptively reducing our workload. Therefore, that audit that we asked you for information on that we planned on starting is now canceled. No changes. Consider the case closed. And I'm like, woohoo! Because that's just a whole bunch of time that I avoided having to just invest. But as a U.S. citizen, I'm concerned because there have been multiple, independent bodies in addition to the government itself that have proven that this particular unit returns $6 for every dollar that's invested, just finding people that are not compliant. Because again, as shocking as it may seem, there are some people who just don't frickin' file at the high net worth level, or they just lie. Like I know that, I know that seems unbelievable, that would happen, but they are out there. So, as a U.S. citizen, unless they're going to figure out a way to automate that, or figure out, hire some goons to go knock on Jack's door. Hey, you ain't paid your taxes. It's like, I do wonder, like, well, how are they going to replace that $6 of revenue recovery, or $5 net of revenue recovery that they were getting just by saying, be compliant with the tax code, please. So that was a long-winded answer to the question that there are a lot of places that I would have liked to have seen them cut. The IRS was not one of them. That wasn't self-serving. It's more like, look, if I could eradicate one of the biggest pains in my ass as a managing partner at BGW, it would be having to deal with not getting notices cleared timely by the IRS, and that's just going to get worse. Or my clients calling all the time and saying, hey, it's been a couple months, when am I going to get that refund? As if it's my fault.
Right.
So anyway, soapbox. I will now step off the soapbox, sir.
And just for the record, the inappropriate response, or you shouldn't respond with, you talking to me? Who you talking to me kind of thing when the IRS comes knocking at your door either.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
or taking the, hey, it's not constitutional, position, blah, blah.
I pay
you
your
saw it on
salary.
YouTube
Yeah,
or on
no.
TikTok.
Yeah, I pay plenty of taxes. I pay payroll taxes on behalf of my employee. Yeah, no, I just don't go that route.
So I got to throw one more little ice cube in the punch bowl because this is interesting. I don't know if anybody saw this or not, but this came across my feed. It was on the Charlotte Observer. I think I forwarded it to you guys, but I don't like this, but we knew that when we started this thing 5 years ago, this month, as a matter of fact, next week, before PPP was a thing, and then once PPP became a thing, we knew that there was going to be some fraud happening. And a woman in Charlotte has been sentenced to serve time for a $1.5 million COVID fraud scheme dealing with PPP, COVID relief funds. So the long arm of the law is still going to come after you. Even as jumbled as things may be, bad boys, bad girls, don't, what you going to do when they come for you, man. That's not good. We love having you pay as little taxes as possible and taking home as much as possible. That's legal and ethical.
Yeah, and
However,
I heard on the news, like I heard, I haven't looked it up or seen any fact checking on it, but I did see that they did, cross correlate that some people had fraudulently either obtained EIDL loans or PPP loans utilizing social security numbers of dead people because the dead people were still active. Like they hadn't actually found social security payments to dead people, but they did find the social security numbers were still in use and being used for other purposes, which is fairly common.
Yeah. So, those three biggies, those were the things that people have talked about in the last 24 to 48 hours, or newsfeed on this COVID fraud case, and in that case from the Charlotte Observer. Yeah, all you got to do is, if you want to go more detail, just look at COVID fraud in the Charlotte region, and this one will come up with the Charlotte Observer. But let's get into some other questions like, hey, and if we got a good group on here right now, we got 31 people logging on. So if you have questions, feel free to hit us in the Q&A. If you want to harass us, Papa Joe's really good about that, just hitting us in the chat. He's probably not on, it's a good day to be golfing. It's a little cool, but man, the rain came and went, and the winds blew and went. And oh, one other quick thing. Is it true that Charlotte Mecklenburg schools were closed because of wind? Is that true?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, that's true.
Which
that was
I'm like,
silly.
okay, the roads were nicer to drive, so I'm okay with that. And since we're beyond that age period, but yes, and there was justifications for it with respect to the winds. And I mean, our buildings uptown are designed to actually move a little bit, and they were moving. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Well,
you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I was just going to say, oh, they said they could blow buses over. Oh, thank you, Tanya. Well, maybe that's the case. Adam grew up in Oklahoma. I grew up in Kansas, and that's called Tornado Alley. And I cannot remember ever school getting canceled because of tornadoes, but we were under desks more than once.
Yeah, I definitely rode the bus, and 50 mile an hour winds was called a light breeze. Yeah. So you wanna hop into the speech?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
All
Oh,
right.
by the way, Joe did play golf. He is on here, so he's not harassing us on the chat, but just so you know.
Perfect. So I'll hit on the tax piece. Jack, you can, if you want to hit on, quick Google on the tariffs and everything else that you want to hit on and immigration. But so there you go. You got 5 minutes to get your Google search done or see what ChatGPT says about the subject. So a couple things in the tax front, I think first and foremost, there wasn't any new information. So I think from that standpoint, that's actually positive in a lot of respects, because what it means to me is that all the ban the IRS, radically change the tax system, like all that stuff. It's like, if you're going to take a shot on that goal, that would have been the great opportunity to do it, and he didn't. Instead he just said, we want to extend the tax cuts that we already made, and then add in a few more items. So I felt like that generally was positive news, I think, from the stand, like regardless of how you feel about it in terms of deficit or whatever. But it's like, that's actually, Joe, Tulsa's not really Oklahoma. Just kidding. It is, but it is different. Where I'm from is Oklahoma. Tulsa's like Charlotte and Oklahoma. But so I thought that was pretty positive news. I think that the three things that he talked about again, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, no tax on tips. I don't see that going anywhere. Just because there's so many inequities associated with that, meaning like, again, I know not at Shoemaker, Jack, but I'm sure that, perchance there's a possibility that paralegals are considered exempt in the shoemaker organization. I don't know. Possibly, is that, maybe a true statement? He's like, wait a second, I'm not, I can't, no, I'm not a camera, am I right? Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah. So,
depends.
yeah. So, I mean, but what that effectively means, to put this in practical terms, what this means is that, they're paid, a paralegal at shoemaker is probably paid a salary, like or maybe not a shoemaker, maybe in another place. And it's probably at more than the $38,000 or whatever it is, the minimum salary level is, that is required to pay overtime if a person is still considered exempt, which means exempt from overtime. Fair Labor Practices Act, but exempt from overtime. So, we got paralegal over here, and Jack says, hey, there's a big contract. I'm going to need big closing coming up. I'm going to need you. Paralegal works overtime, air quotes, but it's not that Jack would ever do that. Jack's a benevolent boss. But, paralegals got overtime, but it's part of salary. That's just part of the job, right? The exact same person driving a bulldozer that's now having to work the weekend to make up for the day off that they had for the weather delay, but because the weekend gets overtime, like, that's just not fair. Which is why I mean, they could do it, but it doesn't seem fair. So I don't see it going. Same problem exists with tipped employees. I don't see it going anywhere. What would you do with the FICA tip credit then at that point for restaurateurs? Like, it's a lot of stuff. So I don't see a lot of change happening there. What I could see them doing too, that's not necessarily tax policy per se, but when they talked about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, I do see them potentially raising the retirement age and doing, raising the retirement age and potentially changing some stuff about the funding mechanism in terms of, like, hey, do we change the income limitations beyond inflation, stuff like that? So, because that would be I mean, it to my own opinion, that's a smart idea anyway. But that would be kind of a classic. Hey, we're gonna make a rate cut permanent, but we're gonna take something away here, which is now Jack has to work 2.5 years longer, which Jack was probably going to do anyway. So that's what I saw from the tax side. So good news. In other words, like, if you still want to listen to the podcasters that are talking about how we're going to abolish the IRS tomorrow, you're more than welcome to. However, it's not. I'm not betting my house on that. I'm not even going to bet this shoe on that one at this point. Otherwise, it would have been brought up. I mean, if you think about it, it's like, look at the equivalent. Lyndon McMahon, instructions coming out, dismantle the Department of Education. Like, don't you think they would have said that about the IRS?
Yeah.
And same sort of thing. Like, again, I'll get off my soapbox now, Jack. Officially, there was something that happened in Florida where DeSantis talked about changing the property tax regime, which Florida doesn't have an income tax. So it's like, okay, well, how are you going to limit, like, if you eliminate property taxes, you basically have eliminated the source of local revenue for schools, fire, police. Like, in other words, like, if you look at Mecklenburg County as specifically CMS, I want to say, what, Jack, like 60% of its budget is funded off property taxes. So what it really is in Florida, if you read between the lines, is the state government would like the ability to control the means of taxation and doling out the money and take that out of local hands, which is sort of the opposite of everything I stand for.
Yeah, well, if you take a look at your recent property tax bill carefully, you'll see that it'll tell you specifically how much is going to the county, how much is going to the schools, how much is going to your local fire department to provide, you know, rescue and fire services. So absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to answer that question or go into that
Yeah.
question. Okay.
Yeah, Bruce, thanks. Yeah, it was good to be back in Kansas. They had 0 and below 0 weather the week before I was there, and it was in the 50s and 60s. So everybody, and sunny. So everybody was in a very good mood. However, so here's his question. He says, from your recent trip to Kansas and communication with friends and relatives in Kansas and Oklahoma, I don't have any. Well, yeah, I've got some connections into Oklahoma, but we try to avoid those folks because look at Adam. I mean, so I'm kidding. What's the general mood for the agricultural environment is the threat of tariffs and impacted exports and reductions in price, profit drops for domestic agricultural output. So here, you probably won't like this, but it will make sense. It depends if they voted for Trump or not. It's that simple. Like I have never seen a group of people that normally get along as divided. You know, the people that voted for Trump think it's just going to be the greatest thing, and the people that don't think that, you know, the world has gone to hell in a handbasket, and it's just like there's no in between. That's why I'm wearing purple because just being wildcat, you're gonna be much happier. So I don't know, man. I mean, a lot of speculation, and I think it really comes down to what is the news source that you're listening to? Seriously, you know, I mean, it's really interesting. And I've got family members that are on completely opposite sides of the table from me, and they want to like just jump into it. I'm like, time out, man. Let's back it up a little bit. And like we actually had civil discourse, and we could actually, but people that aren't willing to go there and they just want to be, you know, stoking the fires of whatever the media bias is, it's just not a good thing. Um, are we going to do a live feed of attendees so they can hold paddles up? Hey, you know, when we do the Dung Kings, you guys, you know, it's the audience, you can do whatever you want to do. So, Joe, you better be there. By the way, April the 3rd at the Hamilton, 11 a.m., there will be Dunkin' Donut holes for anybody that arrives early and some Dunkin' Donuts coffee. And then we'll have some food afterwards, which will be a lot of fun. So join us. We'd love to have, and we can fill and pack the place out. So it'll be fun. But it's up to you, Joe. I could see you doing that.
Yeah, I was going to say yes, you have an opportunity in a few weeks, and then also asking the audience not to tell too many people, tell people about the event, but maybe leave out the whole Duncan thing because I don't want to have to pay a royalty to them for using their name.
Oh
Actually, they
yeah.
should be paying us because of the subliminal messages that we've been giving
Heck
and will
yeah.
continue to give, and that they will see right
They
in
should
front of
be
them.
paying us.
They should be
They
paying
should
us,
be paying
actually.
us.
Yes, definitely. Um,
Joe,
so
you're funny.
so let's get into kind of the other aspects of tariffs. So here, and I'm subject to correction. My understanding of tariffs are I mean, it's a tax is what it is, but it's imposed at a different time and on different people. So a tariff is imposed upon the manufacturer or the seller on the front end. And so in order to be able to have that cross into the border of the country that is imposing the tax. And in comparison to a sales tax, which is imposed upon the user or purchaser of the item at the time, and then that money is paid to the government by the entity, the company that took it in. Meaning, when you go to Best Buy and buy something, when you pay sales tax, that's kept separate in the books, and then that is paid to the government and is not part of revenue. Which is interesting because a lot of times I have to negotiate that out of or be very specific in a franchise agreement that gross revenue does not include any taxes or anything else that we don't actually get to keep. And you can't charge a royalty against that. But what the impact, what everybody's talking about, what the car manufacturers are talking about, the CEOs apparently wrote a joint letter, or maybe they were even in DC personally pleading for a delay of the imposition of these tariffs, is that ultimately it is we, the consumers, that end up paying for this. It isn't the case where, somebody who is importing something into the US as a distributor that gets their product from a foreign manufacturer, is the manufacturer is not going to say, oh, well, we got you covered for that 25%. Go ahead and keep your prices the way they are when you, as a distributor, and then, don't charge any more to your retailers. And therefore, retailers don't really have to charge anything to the ultimate end user or consumer. It isn't how it works. I mean, it's logical that those are going to be passed along like anything else that we consume, is that if prices go up for any part of the process to get that to us, whether it's a good or a service, that the cost of that is going to be passed along, because those producers of goods and services are not going to absorb the cost. Now, I'm not saying that it's 100% pass through every single time. But what that does is, psychologically, does that modify our behavior? Does that say, well, now that I may have gone and bought that, but because it costs more, maybe I won't buy that, or more likely case, I won't buy as much of that, or I'll make things last longer. And some people will come back and say, that's stupid. A little price increase is not going to make a difference. But put that on a scale of, the entire United States, and us as consumers making choices that are influenced by the prices that are now increased. I mean, look at the craziness about eggs. Look at just generally how prices have gone up with supply and demand. Look what happened to all of us in COVID and prices, and the increase in prices that were maybe legit, but also the gouging that we experienced. And, the attorney generals, the US, the feds and state attorney generals had to get involved in all of that. So that is what people are concerned about, which is that. And so as consumers, as business owners, it is, well, I'm going to have less customers. I'm going to have less revenue. I don't think that my landlords are going to decrease the rent because of an increase in tariff and a decrease in my profitability and gross and net revenue. So, I don't think my franchisor is going to adjust my royalty payments because I have to charge more. In fact, they probably like it that I have to charge more, but it's going to cost me more on the front end to get those ingredients, to get those things that I'm now selling to the consuming public. So those are the reactions, or what's going on. And so then you have various groups like farmers that are saying, well, okay, so let me get to the next step. So we do all these things and we say, you can't bring stuff into the US until you pay more money. So it's a penalty on those foreign manufacturers. Well, those countries, the governments of those countries are not going to stand by and say, oh, well, the US is just being a bully and we're just going to accept it. No, they're going to retaliate. And they're going to say, oh, really? So you send all this stuff over here into our country, into Germany and other places, Canada and the US, maybe more relevantly, impertinently, we're going to do the same. And in fact, the prime minister, which I think it is the prime minister of Canada, right? It's not chancellor, it's prime minister, basically said,
not Governor Jack, prime minister.
Prime minister. So said that, yes, it said that, not yet, right? Yes.
I was gonna say, last time we tried to take over Canada, the Capitol got burned, so that's no good.
Yes. Maybe we start with Greenland, because, why not? Or the Gaza Strip. That's not meant to be political. That's meant to be flippant. So what happens is these other governments, they come back and they say, all right, so hey, Ford, yeah, you want to sell your cars, your trucks over here? We're going to do the same. And so then that's why Ford is going to the government saying, please reconsider. But you have companies that manufacture stuff here in the US that are, all US manufactured, and they have that USA label on them, but they ship it out to other places, to other countries. And so now those business owners are going to have to deal with that. What about if you're not the actual manufacturer, but things that go into your products that you sell abroad? So you're not the ultimate manufacturer, but you're aggregating different things to put together a product, then you sell overseas. If it comes from the US, then you're going to be hit with a tariff. So there is the aspects of the imposition of these tariffs by the US on foreign manufacturers, but there's also the impact of the retaliation, which is they're going to do the same for US sourced goods. So that's kind of the general background of all of that, and kind of the consequences of some of the consequences. I mean, we could spend a lot of time talking about foreign monetary policy and everything else. And I will say, I had read that originally tariffs were a source of revenue for the federal government. And it was, okay, well, you know, if you want to do business with our US citizens and sell them stuff, then it became, you know, as I think the reformation of, and this is getting very Cliff Clavin-ish, but that's okay, unless you guys want to stop me, which is that, you know, with tax reformation and dealing with focusing more on income tax and property tax as sources of revenue and other things, that the whole concept of tariffs was really more to, I want to say manipulate, but to manage foreign policy with respect to commerce. And so it was used to say, okay, well, you know, we're going to do this because you're doing that. So it was used sometimes mostly defensively. And it's been a while, according to my research, that before, since the last time that we were very aggressive in doing this and putting, you know, as Trump would say, America first, and making sure, but we're going to be retaliated against. So again, this is not political. They're not political statements. It's just what I see as cause and effect with all this stuff going on from two different perspectives, from ours, US, and from theirs, foreign. So that was a lot. And we can't see any of you, so we don't know if your heads are steaming with melting.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, and again, you know, the fact checkers on both sides will spew their facts, air quote. But what, and I used to do work with a tire manufacturer in South Korea as well as in Japan. And when I heard that South Korea's average tariff is 4 times higher, I'm like, really? On stuff coming in versus stuff coming out, because we, you know, they actually make a pretty good tire in South Korea. Kumo makes pretty doggone good tire, and so does Yokohama Tire. I did a lot of work with those guys in Japan. But and that's actually true, but there's a most favored nation difference between, and like the U.S. Doesn't charge, it's a 0%, and then if it was imported, it was 0.79%. So there is a difference. He was actually right when he said what he said, but there is a you know, there's probably more to the story on a lot of this stuff, right? It's a very interesting thing. So anyway, let's move to another implication, like tariffs, IRS, you know, what's going to happen with the tax rate. Now, I'm hearing, and I'd like you to weigh in on this too, Adam. Like, do you think that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was enacted during Trump's first term will be ratified and made again the law of the land?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question. If I had to bet, yes, I would say yes. But if you think about the route that it's going to take to get there in the current environment, you've got, so in other words, like buckle in for the ride because it probably won't look like it will for a long time. And there'll be a lot of back and forth and, doom and gloom. So you have a group of extremely fiscally conservative Republicans who don't ever vote for a government funding, increase the debt limit, like just I'm never going to vote for that, period. I don't stand for it. So you can't argue with the fact that this will increase the deficit because, I know at Shoemaker they do a different kind of math. It's called lawyer math. But with our clients, we do CPA math, and CPA math, if I reduce my prices but don't sell more product, I'm reducing revenue.
Yeah.
So like that's just a fact. Like I'm going to be, well, let me back up. It's not that the government will be taking in less revenue. It's that it won't have an increase in revenue by having it expire. Thus, we will continue to operate at the same deficit levels that we're at right now, which is bad. So then you say, well, what if we had some spending cuts to go along with that, to offset them? And it's just that the level of spending cuts that you would have to do to offset it are, far beyond what's been proposed. So that like these would be like, we're cutting bone out, or we're cutting limbs off, at this point. So, so you're in a pickle. So you've got some some fiscal conservatives that will say, not unless these tax cuts pay for themselves. But getting the tax cuts to pay for themselves will be quite unpopular based on what it would take to get that done. So then you look to the Democrats, hey, will you give us some support? I don't see any coming there.
No.
You know,
They won't stand
so,
for a kid that
yeah,
has had
so,
cancer for 6 years. So they aren't going to do that.
yeah, so I don't see a scenario where there's going to be, even though they're actually, if you roll back the clock and say, what was the Kamala Harris tax proposal? It actually included, for the most part, an extension of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act with just some more boundaries on like, hey, maybe there should be an income limitation here. Maybe we should raise this a little bit here. So, you could make the argument there actually there is bipartisan support. But so I see it getting ugly, a lot of leaning on, get a squeaker through, last minute, Q3 pass. If I was going to bet, with a lot of ugliness along the way.
So Bruce has hit us with another good question and jump ball for you guys. One last comment on tariffs. Most of the talk is on both sides has been around physical products and commodities. What will be the direct and indirect impact if the trade war escalates to all services and intellectual property?
So I was thinking about that in the sense that, well, long-winded way of getting around to this, but talking about AI and when Jade last week was talking about having certain accents for certain receivers of the information, and she had said something about Texas, I think, but the services that are provided abroad that work their way back into the US, so like call centers. With respect to intellectual property, I would anticipate that is fair game because intellectual property is usually embodied into goods. And even if it is, well, let me share the intellectual property on how to make something and make it in the US, but the information, the blueprints, literally and figuratively, were sourced from abroad and were licensed. So you have, what is the potential impact on licenses that originate outside of the US that come into the US for the production of goods or even services? So I think there is an indirect hit to those, I would anticipate, but I don't know of, an actual application of that yet. But I have been thinking about how that is going to impact some of our clients that use, as I said, call centers that are sourced in other countries that come into now. It may be that those countries haven't been hit with the tariffs or yet, or maybe do have most favored nation status already that you've talked about. So, but I think it's going to have a broad impact. Maybe not at this time, but I think down the road, the reach is going to be pretty expansive and extensive.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that the call centers and the like VAs, there are a lot of people that use VAs that are in Philippines or various places. Any other questions from the gallery? Is like this has been a pretty good discussion. It's interesting if you look at attendance on these things. They always ramp up when there's ambiguity and people are afraid of like, uh-oh, and there's opportunity, but it was like at COVID, during COVID, we had almost 400 on this thing at one point. And we continue to stay in that 28 to 35 or 40 every week, which is good. As long as you guys keep showing up, we'll keep doing it if it provides value. And if it doesn't, then we won't keep doing it. But as long as it provides value. But if you have questions, whether it be on speculation on what's happening, or if you have other things that are of concern regarding tax, we're right in the middle of tax season right now, that you've wondered, and you can remain anonymous if you want, that's fine. Hit us, hit us up. Same way
Yeah,
on the legal front.
I'll hit the couple questions that happen. The IRA funding being unfrozen. It's a good question. I think that that one might be a little bit of time because I'm trying to think about, well, what would be the court case that would actually unfreeze that one. So that could be a little bit of time. To Joseph's question, I think this is just Adam's opinion. I mean, if you look at the state of North Carolina as an example, there's a bill making its way that would say to the attorney general, you don't have the ability to sue the federal government. I believe that's what it is, right, Jack? Like you don't have the ability to sue the federal government. You basically have to follow the rules of the federal government, which if your party is empowering the federal government, you can see why, yeah, screw you, that's ridiculous. I mean, the recourse to that would be then elect an attorney general from your own party. Like you could go that route versus trying to legislate it. I think the thing that I have a concern about with all this stuff, which is the point about what can be done to stop the federal judges from stopping the Doge effort, is that the knife cuts both ways. Administrations come and go. Parties swing in power. So whatever you do, expect the other party to do when you're in power. So like the whole reason that there's been, if you think about like the US Senate, there's been like this ever escalating walk up to eliminating the filibuster. We're going to eliminate it, but only in certain circumstances, but they haven't eliminated it entirely. And that's because their rational heads would say, I won't always be here, in power.
Right.
Or I would like this for when I'm not, and I think that's the same thing in this case. It's like, in other words, if you stop the federal judge from restricting Doge without it letting it play all the way through the court, you're basically saying, well, I guess that the federal government can just ignore court orders, and that's like the opposite of the Constitution. So to Megan's question about the credits and mid government contracts, that's a tough one. I think what'll end up happening with that is that the you know you would have to complain to your congressional office. Your congressional office would then have to do something about it to say, hey, by the way, did you realize there was an unintended consequence here called people that voted for you are now out of a job because you canceled the contract? And that to me would be the way that stuff like that would get fixed.
Yeah, just for anybody, because only the hosts and panelists could see
Oh,
these
got it.
questions. So just so you know, it said solar has a 30% tax credit upgraded through IRA. Thoughts on that being safe under a Trump administration? So that was the first question. The second question was, if government grants are permanently frozen, what recourse do contractors have to recover funds already spent for, like if they're in mid-construction? So that's what he was referring to. Joe, don't want to ignore your question. Will removing taxes on tips change the way restaurants pay servers going forward? I would imagine. I think they're going to have to maintain um, some sort of competitive, they got to do something because I don't think it's just free reign. They'll have to adjust, I would think. Um, this has been a good back and forth today, man. I've really enjoyed this. So
Hey, Gary, I
we're,
want to go back
yeah,
in a moment for the last few moments that we have and about the judicial interference with Doge. And it's funny,
yeah.
indicative of, if you did watch the president and when he said, made the statement of, and, the time of unelected bureaucrats spending money is over. And then I counted the number of seconds before, and I could have been like the director for the cameras and like, okay, and switch to Elon Musk immediately, right? And so and it's
Right.
exactly what happened is like, okay, hey, what about, and you heard the boos and the booing and everything else, but that I think is the core issue, which is that you have, and the justification is, well, no, he's not an unelected bureaucrat. He is a patriot that has the ability and resources and technology and knowledge on how to run algorithms to figure out what's good and what's bad. Is the defensive nature of, or what's being said about that. And again, not agreeing, disagreeing. I'm just basically sharing what I've heard. And so, but that is the nature of the issue, which is, okay, that this isn't happening in the traditional form of somebody, a true auditor going in and saying, but the problem is that, or what is being alleged is that even auditors are, in some cases, they're being accused of being corrupt, but that their mandates are limited. And even when they find stuff, it's kind of like, well, there's justifications and they don't have the authority to be able to do something about it. They can only report on it and then someone will justify that. So that's kind of what happens, I think.
Um, yeah, that's funny. If it was anyone other than Elon in that role, would they have been treated the same way? Probably not. Probably not. It's interesting because in a very similar thing in a much smaller scale, a guy that was a partner with me in this private equity firm, he had made a ton of money with three other guys. They had developed a software company right out of college. And during the Gulf War and all that, he felt guilty because he was making money. And then they cashed out and did quite well, not in billions and trillions, but they made hundreds of millions. All right. So he's like, I want to serve my country. I want to serve my country. And so we were able to get him in the, I think it was in Iraq. And because he wanted to use his technical prowess to help from a logistics standpoint and cost cutting and this and that. He came back so disillusioned. He felt betrayed by his country because he saw so much waste. It was really sad to see a guy that went from like G.I. Joe, I can't wait, to almost hating his country because of the gross abuse that was happening. And that was just on the fiscal side. That was just on wasted materials, wasted supplies, waste everywhere. And there's a plenty of it. So, and he volunteered his time same way. And people say, oh, well, you just wanted to get something. No, I know this guy. Eric is a great guy. But anyway, I mean, again, if you vote this way, that the person that voted the other way is vilified and vice versa. And it's like, we just got to get past that. Be a wildcat, go purple. Thank you, Jamie. Good to see you here, buddy. Show up on the 3rd of April, 11 o'clock, the Hamilton. Be there. It'll be fun. So
We're feeding and watering you, so it's all good.
Feeding and watering and coffee and whatever. So, all right. See you guys. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the sunshine. Bye-bye.
Thank you.